Thank you, Chairman Sir, members of the panel and my friends here. The afternoon classes, ever since I have been teaching for 12 years in university before joining UN, I have never taken a class in the afternoon and never attended a class in the afternoon. No wonder I changed my universities 5 times. I taught almost in 9 universities. I wanted to start it because one of the area where I want to make it, one thing I was talking to some of my friends here in ICT was that I was teaching development communication, being a teacher of English language and communication strategies. And I used to tell them the greatest communicator is not Dale Carnegie. It's the guy who sells all kinds of, the herbal medicine in front of our courtyard in every district, in every town in India. He holds the very busy person for half an hour and sell his medicine, and everybody knows that medicine worth nothing, but everybody pays up ultimately. So he is the greatest communicator, and fortunately he does not have MS PowerPoint. Now this is one thing which diverts your attention, and I want to communicate with you more naturally, but if you don't put a PPP, people say that okay, this guy is not in ICT. Whenever one area of interest in our ICT policy, this is a session and policy, and my paper as it shows, it is the trends and issues in Africa, and why I said Africa and why it is found relevant here. When I presented my abstract to the organizing conference, I never know that I will be here in January with Asia. I would have made another presentation from my experience back home in Assam. It's that if someone can correct me, I want to start with the literature part, but most probably it is the starting lines of Jane Austen's novel, or maybe Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, that happy peoples are all alike, खुश लोग सब एक जैसे हैं, unhappy people are unhappy in their own ways. I'm trying to paraphrase. So poverty, wherever it is, whether it is in Africa, or it is in Asia or in India, it has its own dimension and it has its own feelings. It is so localized and so contextualized. If you can draw an analogy, it is like a nail coming out of your shoe, which will hit you in every step, but rest of the world will never know where it is hitting you, because it is inside your own shoes. In every step you will feel it, while everybody around will be very normal and they will not even feel that while you are taking each step there is a pinch. Perhaps this is the feeling which took me to one of the specialized area in ICT policy when I worked with the Economic Commission for Africa, and as Peter was mentioning, we had a large-scale African continental program called AISI, African Information Society Initiative. And the areas where I was working is poverty reduction and gender mainstreaming. Later on find that is another thing which is very difficult to survive. You turn up in any workshop, you find the ratio is so biased towards the women that you feel threatened yourself. But working in gender area was an interesting area. Now, what I want to do is that, this I'll avoid. The Niki thing is a kind of African continental term which UNICT division was doing. It's called National Information and Communication Infrastructure Policy. Now, one of the area where we thought that ICT as in African continent, in African countries, maybe some of the African countries where I worked on, 10 years, 12 years ago when I was a student in university, I used to wish to get a job abroad. You made your passport when you were in BA final year. And then you look into the empty pages every 6 months. And then you feel like to have a visa from Nepal or Bangladesh, not to keep it empty. Some of my friends are still doing it. I met one of them in Delhi last week. He wanted to go to Dhaka, but I got him a visa to Washington to come with me to World Bank meeting, and he's so happy. So when I prayed God listen, and God listened in another way, I went into Cambodia. That was my first UNESCO thing. And Cambodia, just after the regime was overturned, it was just after my postdoctoral years in Bangkok. And then to Rwanda 1.5 years, again after a violent genocide. And then to Ethiopia, and then to Sierra Leone and back to India. So you can see my journey, all post-conflict, war-ravaged countries, and where we are finding it very difficult to even put a single primary. In Rwanda, for example, when the primary education sector was not coming up, the schools have been all burnt down because of the Hutu-Tutsi genocide. We were trying to make Rwanda's first University of Science and Technology, called Kigali Institute of Science and Technology, KIST. We were deputed by Government of India through ISED. It was a government-funded program, completely ICT driven. The justification was given like that if Rwanda has to wait for its primary education sector to come up, secondary education sector to come up, after I'm talking of 1999, genocide was 94, 5 years after. Then can Rwanda wait for that silver lining on the horizon? And then it starts its Institute of Science and Technology. GTZ Germany was giving us a development fund, UNDP was spearheading the program, and there was a lot of criticism. Even our vice chancellor was imported. There's not a single guy inside the country to run an university, no idea. So we had Professor Wakapamba coming from Tanzania with his he was from University of Dar es Salaam, electrical engineering. 10 years later, when I visited in 2004, Rwanda again as a policy expert of UNHCR, Kigali and Rwanda is now one of the most exemplary, perhaps which is aware, the accelerated, we call it ICT policy for accelerated socio-economic development policy. And Rwanda is spearheading that. We can still remember the ICT was the internet we were talking about, which I thought in India, I almost got fired in NIT Silchar where I was working. We have a large bandwidth, a VSET is there. We don't want to give free access to the students, in the sense that they can dial up from anywhere. You get 5 lines in and they can dial up. They don't have to buy VSNL expensive lines. That I'm talking of 1999. But Kigali Institute was giving it free. It was using its own computer level and ISP. And the first ISP to say in Rwanda. What I want to tell you that in states like Assam, where ICT policies, or even some of the northeastern states, or you can take Jharkhand and other places, we cannot perhaps wait to catch up with Haryana or even in Karnataka or Hyderabad or Andhra Pradesh. We have to, people are now, it is a cliche, the leapfrog. We have to leapfrog some steps of development. And this is where we have the information technology or ICT policy. I'm talking particularly, this is my area, policy framing. When we maintain a policy, we have to link that ultimately we don't develop ICT as a sector itself. We develop people. We develop economies. We help small enterprises. We help small people, rather than we help buying some, as I was telling, some 1,000 machines from some companies. So this is the dichotomy which we are. That we have to develop ICT as a sector in industry. Maybe in Bangalore, you can have a call center, you can have so many ICT-led initiative. But for Assam, I don't have a single call center there. I don't have a single, maybe huge amount of export-oriented software technology. But we have a software technology park established in Guwahati. Now, there perhaps we have to utilize some of the things being developed in Bangalore, Hyderabad or elsewhere and put it into the use of the people. Now, where is the gap? In case of Africa, and why I found this relevant, because some of the major issues from Africa will tell you with some of the things which happens in India and some of the states. Now, the approach, of course, I was talking about that it is a process of digital inclusion and digital divide, which was a kind of prominent issue when we were preparing for the WSIS in Tunisia and even before that in Geneva. Now, the vision which emerged, and perhaps some of the states, some of these things can be shared. The benefit of ICT for a people-centered, free market-based, export-oriented socio-economic development strategy, that should be the basic of our ICT strategy. Today, when we talk of ICT policy back home, as I was telling you, that we talk of incorporating ICT curriculum. After ICT curriculum, what? This is one of the poorest things. If I digress into the gender issues, even today we have innumerable seminars on development of education, women and develop women education. Every 8 months you are almost bombarded with a lot of lectures from everywhere. But nobody in this country talks about the women, graduate women who are without job, without a respectable earning, without a respectable way of getting the bread and butter solved. So in terms of ICT, again we are talking the same thing. We try to put some schools into the computerization network. We try to put some of the students into the ICT literacy drive. The class project was a great HRD funfair. But at the end of it, we don't have a strategy to utilize that particular skill, ICT skill, into something which can make him a bit more socio-economically empowered, whether man or woman. Perhaps this is the time when we talk about it. I'm skipping this. Now, these were some of the national development goals, and if you pick up any of the PRSPs, as you know, the poverty reduction strategy papers, and even the state development visions, I think most of the states and most of the countries perhaps in the world will perhaps tell you with some of these, which are actually African, particularly for the West African Gambian. The productive capacity of the poor, access to the performance of social service, local level capacity building. Until and unless a person travels from Guwahati to Bangalore or to Kanpur, he does not know anything about making a leather product, for example. How do we make that particular boy educated but unemployed, some kind of ICT oriented skill without traveling all the way to Bangalore or to Hyderabad and becoming a network engineer only to find that he has no link back to his home, or he has not helped another 4 or 5 boys to come up. Only his father could afford to send him to Bangalore and pay for it. Yes, Peter. Then perhaps the paradigm shift, therefore, has to have a larger, it should not have been a donor-driven structural advancement program, as you can see, the most famous and some controversial one. And then incorporating the ICT tools in the transformational process of information society. The societies which are transforming. Pepsi and Coca-Cola is reaching some of the remotest area where even perhaps except my police and my rebel people in Assam nowhere goes, but Pepsi cans and Coca-Cola bottles are there. But we could not reach some of our, at least even you can see the paracetamol could not reach there because somewhere the health department thought it is unreachable, that community can die in fever. And it is beyond the money matters. That's one economy that I said that when you have to feel about poverty and poverty eradication, you have to feel with the heart, not with the statistics. It is a human aspect of people's life, and that's where we are going on. Offering multiple choice. I should have taken the chair in the first session. Offering multiple choice for economic prosperity and growth. And this is where a kind of model which can be, I'll try to conclude with this, it's very fair enough, and that's why I hate PPs, PowerPoints. That's analysis of the national socio-economic status. Here you can put it into more larger, as I said in the very beginning, I started with that famous quote, that unhappy people are unhappy in their own ways. So the poor in Karnataka and Shimoga district will be far different from the poor in Faridabad and the poor in Assam in my Guwahati Kamrup district. Then we started a consultation, which is a very difficult process anyway. We find a target where we hit in. It can be Vision 2020, it can be national vision, it can be even the Gram Panchayat level strategies we were talking about, it can have a village vision. And then we integrate the ICT into that system. And then of course we need a dynamics of change, bureaucratic legacy which we have. Legislative and regulatory authorities should go hand in hand. We are talking about opening up a community radio station, and now we are talking about not having a revenue generation. And of course, the national leadership and sectoral commitments. So in a nutshell, I want to share this with you. There are countries in Africa where we served, perhaps as an ambassador of India's young ICT sector. And in policy framework, we found it very difficult to realize or to at least implement the programs and policies which ultimately lead a part of the industrial revolution or technological or information revolution reach to the poor. If you remember the famous quote by Rajiv Gandhi where he said 100 paisa goes from Delhi and it comes to 20 paisa back to the village. ICT, again, it is coming to that kind of syndrome, 100 to 20 syndrome. It does not delve down. We talked about CIC, I don't want to talk about again. But if it is, the challenge today and the issues which are coming up is one, we have to redirect our policy from developing ICT itself to developing human being, developing people's economics with the help of ICT. And number two, the policies which are already in place, how do we reach them, how do we implement them, and perhaps the younger people, as I said, will come as soon as we take the leadership, will come forward. And number three, of course, in each village, in each community, in each family, we need a leadership change now. With the electronic voting machine, it is coming to our hands. And in each community, someone from this college, someone from this community should take up the leadership to do it. Otherwise, we people who are in higher ed, we got the higher education, we will do an injustice to the fellow community to which we belong. Each one of us has a root to our village, to our society, to our religion, to our culture, to our language. And any of them you affiliate with, if you want to serve your Kannada language, do something with that. And you have to give back because we are the fortunate ones. Out of thousands illiterate or thousands unfortunate poor Indians, we are the fortunate ones to get into the ICT bus. So it is our time to put our hand out and take them in. If we don't do this, perhaps we can be very happy with our generation, our children going to becoming another software engineer, becoming greater scientists. But in the eyes of that power might be the supernatural, if we believe in that. In those eyes and the eyes of ourselves, 30 years later or 10 years later, will fail our community and the society itself. That's the challenge.